Hi. Right.
Hello.
Okay. Can hear, right?
Yes.
Right. So we will start now. Welcome everyone to our live talk again. Today we will be talking on this topic: how to equip ourselves better to help those who need our support. Right. So today we have our lovely counselor here, Naomi, and I'm a clinical psychologist. My name is Yong Sing. So we have been working with a lot of clients with mental health issues and struggles, and they also have their family members and loved ones to often ask us about this. How can we support them better? And also we get some questions on the live talk previously as well on how to support their friends or how to talk to their friends when they are experiencing some of these mental health symptoms, right? So today we'll be talking about this, breaking down this topic a bit more, such as these 4 sections. So firstly, Naomi will be expressing and explaining about how to recognize the common symptoms in mental health struggles. And then I'll be talking more about what are the severity levels that we need to look out for and who to refer to. Then we'll be going into more details about what are the do's and don'ts, what should we say and what should we refrain from saying so that we help we support them better. And lastly is how to take care of yourself as the caregiver, which Nani will be talking more about lah. So Nani, would you like to go on? You may introduce yourself a bit more and also start off.
For sure. And yeah, thank you so much for a very lovely introduction. And yes, I'm happy to be back again. So I'm a registered counselor at PPC, and like what Young Sin said, yes, we've been working closely with not just clients with struggles, mental health struggles, but also family members, right? And yes, it's been a great part. Sorry, it's been a pleasure in being able to do a part where we help others understand people with mental health and mental health issues and what they are struggling with, to help them understand. I think it's a good direction that we are working towards so that, we are together building a community or at least an environment within a person's circle, at least an environment that is safe where people are more understanding towards this kind of struggle. So yeah, today we are diving more deeply into that. And it's not just about understanding the struggles. We are going to be able to hopefully equip ourselves by end of today's live session with the necessary skills, not just the skills, but also like on understanding like what we can do to help someone better and in ways that they actually help. Because sometimes you feel like we are helping someone, but whether or not it's a helpful way, that's always a big question. So today we'll clarify more on that. But firstly, we need to know the signs, right? Who actually needs help? Like, when someone actually needs help, we need to be able to look into those signs, and especially to look more into signs that are often overlooked, because it's really easy to overlook. People are great at masking it. We all do it as well. So, and yeah, I guess it's a good thing also as we talk about this to reflect on ourselves as well. Like, if we have these signs within ourselves, then it's a sign that we need to reach out. That's one thing. And if you do observe these signs in people around you and feel like, okay, there is possibility that they are struggling as well. So that's when you know that you can step in. And we're going to talk more into how we can actually do that as well. So let's start with the signs, right? So one of the most common signs would be like something that's easy to spot is that when someone it's not acting in a way that they would usually be, right? They're just not being their usual self. And whenever there's like more emotional reactions, even when it's something that may seem trivial and it can irritate them more, like they get annoyed easily. So when you're noticing them being more irritable, even for things that doesn't really make sense, so that could be a sign that they are facing certain struggles. It shows that they are easily overwhelmed. They are easily, certain emotions get to them easily. So there's a sign that they could be struggling with a lot of things that's happening around them, and it's really overwhelming them, and they could be struggling mentally as well. So that's a sign of stress right there, and that's where we can actually look more into it and try to understand what exactly is happening. But just picking out the signs right away, that will be a good thing to notice. And if you notice mood swings, sorry, you were gonna say something?
So it's something more like just to re-emphasize lah. It's more like they are acting unusually or more irritable than usual.
Yes. Absolutely. And when you're noticing like more mood swings, drastic mood swings, without apparent reasons. So if it makes you ponder like what's wrong with them, what's happening, so that's a sign right there. So you might want to look into that. And if you are, if you're able to notice more, like if you're obviously if it's someone lives with you and you're able to see their sleeping schedule is like really messed up, either they're oversleeping or undersleeping. These kind of things could also be signs as well. And if you're noticing that they're more disconnected from the reality, sometimes you could be talking with them and they're not fully present and they're just like disconnected from you. If you can sense that, that's a sign right there as well. Yeah, so things like that. And usually also when people struggle with mental health issues, or even if it's not an actual mental health issue, even if they're having a lot of emotional struggles happening at the same time, there's a tendency for all of us to distance ourselves more. We just want to be left alone. We tend to isolate ourselves. So if you notice them doing that to you, if you're inviting them somewhere and if they're just like trying to avoid those social situations or events, or just from hanging out, they just prefer to be left alone. So that could be a sign right there as well, if you're noticing more of that happening. So something to look into. Yeah, and a clear decline in their performance could be at work, could be at school, or even in the ways they do certain things. There's like if it's a noticeable distress in them in doing certain things, or like they're not able to concentrate. Those are the things actually, it does tell something actually. So it's good to look into those things as well. Notice if you also notice them being more fatigued, experiencing low energy levels throughout the day, really low, having low mood or motivation to even talk sometimes. And also, even if you're able to have strike a conversation with them, if you're noticing their conversations, usually the topic of the conversation, try to look more into that as well. Observe what kind of topic they usually talk about, like in what sort of direction it goes. Is it more towards on a more severe level, people can talk more into like topics about death and dying, those kind of things. On a severe note, this could be something that you might want to look out for as well, because sometimes it can be very subtle, but if you really play close attention to things like this, they could really tell something. So look into that. If you sense some kind of like hopelessness in them when they're talking, and you're like, why does this person sound, hopeless most of the time? So that could tell something actually. So really notice those things. And also, again, I would like to touch on like on the severe note as well. When you do notice people being like completely out of character, there and especially after some point, if they've been clearly distressed, but after some point suddenly there's like a certain calmness in that actually is a warning sign. Sometimes you feel like, oh, it looks like they're doing great now, but that could be a warning sign right there. Like suddenly there's like a sudden calmness in them, or sudden changes in their behavior. That could be a sign to look out for actually, because like especially people on that really severe note, and we're like thinking about dying and suicide, this kind of calmness can come in also, because to them it's like, okay, I found my answer, I've decided this is what I'm going to do. So that kind of calmness can come in then as well. So this is something really important to take note of as well. So look out for these kind of things. If you notice reckless behavior in them, just careless for their safety, they just not caring enough about their life and stuff like that, all these can be really important warning signs to look out for. So just be mindful of these things. So all it takes is looking around, observing, picking out this. It can seem subtle, but if you really pay attention, it does. It's right there. It's in front of you, that type of thing. So all it takes is paying close attention. You have something to add on,
Yeah,
Nasin?
I think I like what you say, right? Sometimes they give such a subtle sign that we don't really recognize. For example, sometimes they might also make it as a joke, like the
Yeah,
content itself was sad, or it's like very hopeless kind of content, like what's the meaning in life, what's the point of doing things, but they made it in such a funny way, or they say in a
yeah,
funny way that people don't really recognize that actually they meant it. So I guess also to look at how people they can make it funny, but if they do express these contents, the thought process of what's the point, or hopelessness, helplessness, we can still try and give our care to these friends or family members lah. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So
Yeah,
also like the what you mentioned just now, the sleeping problems or mood swings and all these things, they do come hand in hand that you can observe in a person if they're really out of the zone when you talk to them. There's always inattentiveness there.
yeah,
Mm,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Mm,
And I like about including jokes in this things to observe, right? Definitely jokes are like one of the most common things, like people joke about things like this, and that could be something that could be indicative of something. And that reminded me of of something as well, because like you know how some people are more expressive through writing or
mm,
through music or through art. And yeah, if these are the things that you notice in someone, if they're like drawing something and it looks a little disturbing sometimes, or maybe it could be indicative of something dark that's happening. So that could be, it could tell you something, could be a sign right there. And sometimes we scroll on we spend most of the time on social media these days, and we can look at their post, and if they're writing something in a form of poem, or like just them expressing and they're writing something, if it's more towards the dark kind of note, then that could be a sign right there. All you need to do is reach out to them and see if everything's okay. What was that about? That kind of thing. So
yes.
yeah, these kind of check-ins could be helpful for them as well. That's like one of the ways we can reach out if you do notice this kind of thing. So yeah, really subtle things like jokes, what they post about, what they talk about most of the time. If they are someone who's artistic, what kind of drawings they do, what kind of artwork they tend to be more involved in and stuff like that. Just something to be mindful of. Yeah.
Mm, mm, right. So I think there's one questions here.
Yeah.
May I know if one person always feels shortness of breath when nervous or face something terrifying? How to overcome? Is referring to yourself, to the person who write it lah, right? So it seems like it's more targeted to yourself, right? Uh, Maybe we'll just respond very quickly because it's not entirely related, 100% lah. So if let's say you do experience this shortness of breath, a lot of nervousness, it seems like some anxiety symptoms that you are experiencing, and sometimes when we experience anxiety symptoms, the usual way that we cope with it is the deep breathing or grounding techniques to relax yourself, right? Mm. So, Naomi, would you want to add a bit to this question?
Yeah, so
Mm.
definitely shortness of breath, and is one of the most common symptoms when we are terrified. Just think of anxiety as something that just prepares you to flight or fight, right? So obviously, if you're gonna fight, you're gonna need that energy in you. So that's where your body acts up in a way that tells you like, okay, we are going to either run or fight this. So we need to prepare our body physiologically. So that explains the shortness of breath actually. So it's a really common thing that we experience when we are terrified. Although in that situation, for example, if you're nervous about a performance, or sorry, about like a meeting or a public speaking, so it doesn't require you to actually run or like fight, right? But your body reacts in that way. So although in that situation doesn't make sense why you're feeling shortness of breath, but that's the science behind this, right? So yeah, and definitely in those moments, practicing like what Yongsin suggested, breathing, deep breathing, or grounding also helps, because sometimes people feel like when you're already experiencing shortness of breath, to make that conscious breathing relaxation techniques can be a bit difficult. So grounding helps, where you use your five senses to bring yourself to the present moment. So it involves using your senses, like you'll start with like naming five things around you. So you actually use your sense of sight to name things that you see around you. So you start with five things you see, four things you can feel with your hands, three things that you can hear around you, two things that you can smell, and lastly one thing. The last thing will be something that you can taste. But of course, like in certain situations, we can't do all of this, so you can just focus on one thing. So maybe if you can like pop in a candy, so you can just focus on how the candy tastes like, the kind of sensations you're getting. Or the easiest things would be like if you have something around you that you can touch, just focus on the texture, how if it's how it feels like on your skin. The simplest thing would be just focusing on how the cloth on your body feels like on your arm. So just really choosing one of those things to focus on can help you to ground yourself. So just a quick tip on that. Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of a more detailed how you address your thought process and all that, I think our previous talk, right, address about the thought process, how to deal with the thoughts, or sometimes we have a biasness in seeing things which will lead to your anxiousness. That part maybe you can refer to that as well lah.
Yeah.
All right, so I think we can move on first.
Sure.
Launi, would you have any more things you would like to mention about common signs about mental health struggles?
I think I pretty much wrapped out about the signs actually. So I've also touched on like the obvious ones and also the subtle ones. So yeah, just looking at those things would be helpful. So to really move forward in the topic, you'll be also looking at noticing the severity level and like what kind of resources would be helpful that we can do to help people, right? So I believe that's something that you would want to touch more on. In the meantime, I will look into the questions, so you can go ahead with that.
Yeah. You can we'll try to address the questions one
As
by
we go.
one slowly,
For sure.
right? And also we will talk about the do's and don'ts after noticing the severity level, so you guys will be getting the hands on how to support as well to your family members and your friends. So how to understand or recognize the severity levels of mental health? Just now, Nani had touched on a little bit. For example, they are showing signs of like withdrawing from social situations. They don't want to hang out with you even if you have invited them. They don't want to deal with their assignments, their tasks, their work. They kind of go into that hermit mode or things like that, or they will be so fearful that they are unable to concentrate on their task. So all these symptoms are signifying that some severity, maybe a little bit towards the mental health symptoms disorder as well. But we are not here to tell you how to judge the difference. If you really want to find out whether this is a mental health disorder or not, it really has to go to a practitioner, a therapist, or a psychiatrist to determine that. But meanwhile, if you do notice your family members or your friends having all these symptoms, it's already a sign for you to take note. Okay, I really need to I need to find out more. I need to support this friend or this family member a bit more than usual lah. Okay, so sometimes for example, if you notice they are facing some daily stresses or they are having some relationship conflicts, relationship issues with their family, with their friends, with their partners. So all these daily life stresses can really make a person feel more stressed than usual. Even though not to the extent of mental health disorder, they may show some symptoms of low mood. They don't feel like eating, they cannot sleep well for a few days. So this time is our we can give them this suggestion as well, not to directly, but if later at the later stage, we can refer them to a counselor or a talk therapist or a clinical psychologist so that they can talk through this issue and also process their emotions. So if let's say they are experiencing more of the severe side of it, such as they persistently for more than 2-3 weeks, they have been feeling low mood, they cannot function well. Like Naomi said, it's like they cannot do things well, they cannot do their tasks, they are withdrawing from social situations, poor functioning in concentration as well. So all these things is affecting their functioning. They may need both the talk therapy, such as seeing a clinical psychologist or counselor, and also they may also need the psychiatrist lah. So the medication treatment will be provided by a psychiatrist. The last part would be if you talk to them and you notice they cannot talk in an organized manner. Their thought process are kind of jumbled up, a bit like salad. You couldn't make sense of what they are talking about. Or you also notice some delusions. For example, they believe that people are plotting against them when there's no actually happening yet. They believe that all their devices are hacked. They are saying that people around them are having ill intentions, or they believe they are very, very important people when in real life they're not that celebrity level kind of person. So all these delusion belief can signify that they may be experiencing something more severe that requires a medication to treat them. So Another part of it is also including hallucination. If they do tell you that they hear things that other people cannot hear and very frequently affecting their functioning, they cannot focus at all because of all these noises at their ear, then it can also be a sign that they need a medication treatment from a psychiatrist lah, because this is related to their brain health, and also their all these chemicals in the brain that can only be regulated by a medication. After they are more stabilized, they can talk in an organized way, they can think logically, then it's also best to refer them to a counselor or a psychologist as well to help them process whatever that's happening with them. Yeah, the emotional part of it, right? So the main two things is either you refer to a talk therapist or a psychiatrist as well. Talk therapists include counselor or a clinical psychologist, whereas the psychiatrist part mainly focus on the medication.
Yeah, yeah,
right. So
absolutely.
is there any?
So yeah, so and I think along the way you've also helped in addressing one of the concerns voiced out by one of our audience today. So yeah, definitely when it comes to certain struggles when you're already on medication, it's always best to pair it with therapy as well, with talk therapy as well, because that's where we learn to develop certain skills that's necessary to help us to navigate through all this. Like even with those struggles, how are we going to navigate through our day? How are we going to still function and still perform at work, right? So that's where building those skills would be necessary, and that's where therapy would be helpful. Yes, medication at the side, it will help with the physiological symptoms that you're facing in terms of, for example, depression, when your mood is like really on a low level. Medications help elevating the mood, right? So because this all, it happens internally, so that's when medications help with that internal barrier that's there. It helps relieves that internal barrier, I would say. So just remember that with mental health struggles, and especially with diagnosis and when you're on medication, the goal is to not feel depression. For example, if you're diagnosed with depression, the goal isn't to not feel depressed at all. The goal is to, when you're feeling depressed, how are you going to manage them, right? That's the goal actually. So, and even in situations when it makes sense for you to feel anxious, so the goal isn't to not feel anxious at all, when it completely makes sense to feel anxious, right? In situations where it is anxiety inducing, it makes perfect sense to feel that way. So the goal isn't to not feel it at all, but it's about when you do feel it, how are we going to manage it? So that those skills is where we can learn through therapy, and it takes learning. It takes managing our thoughts, because sometimes our thoughts play a huge part in making us feel a certain way as well. So it's going to take tackling those thoughts and developing skills necessary to help us navigate while we're struggling. How are we going to navigate through these situations? So yeah, I hope that helps in answering your question now, right? And yes, there's another question on, like, when you do identify the symptoms, how do we support? So precisely the point of today's talk session, we will definitely look into that. So I think without further ado, we'll jump straight into the do's and don'ts, right? When you do notice these symptoms in people around you, you do notice the signs, what can we do next, right? So we'll start with the do's and don'ts. And I'm trying to summarize this as much as possible so that it's clear cut, right? We try not to complicate this. So it's pretty clear cut. The do's are basically to listen, right? To listen, offering listening ears to them. That's one thing. And next thing would be to stay calm, because let's be real, it is alarming, it is worrying for us, and especially if it's a loved one, it is worrying for us. But in that moment, it's really crucial that we stay calm, right? And next thing would be offering help. As simple as that, right? So yeah, I will definitely elaborate more on that. And to touch on the don'ts, also three things, right? So I've listed out three things on the do's. So three things on the don'ts would be to avoid judgment, because sometimes what the other person is saying wouldn't make sense to us. But in that moment, the last thing they need is judgments from our side. Like, what are you talking about? Those kind of judgments. So try to avoid that, avoid judgments, and avoid dismissing or invalidating their emotions, because it can, for on the surface level, it can seem like whatever they're facing is something that's manageable, it's small enough, you don't have to feel that way. So we can go into that mode of like invalidating their emotions, saying like, you're being silly, you shouldn't feel this way. So that right there is invalidating. So let's try not to do that, right? So those are the don'ts. don't invalidate them, don't judge them. And lastly would be giving out unsolicited advice. Then that's where we would be questioning, like, what, isn't that the point of helping someone, to give out advice? But that's the thing, right? Do they actually need advice in that moment? That's the question. Sometimes here's where we make mistakes most of the time, where we think we're actually helping someone by giving out advices or saying things, but do they actually need that kind of help, right? Helping in it help the real definition of helping is offering what they need in that moment, isn't what we think they need. So for that, it takes us understanding. So this is where I'm going to elaborate more on the do's, right? So the do's part, as I mentioned earlier, would be to listen, right? And listening has layers to that. It's not just listening. It involves really understanding what the other person is saying and empathizing with them. And yeah, so when it comes to listening, yes, using to be really present in that moment, right? To actually listen what this person has to say. And also listening involves to not just what they're saying, but what they're also not saying, because it's really easy for us to jump into, have certain assumptions and think that, oh, okay, this is what they're saying, and come to a conclusion. But listen to what they're not also saying as well, because they can say A and we can conclude with B. So that's exactly what they're not saying. So be mindful of that. So how we do that is to try to understand if we understood correctly. So we can actually say that, okay, it seems like this is what you're saying. Is that right? You can, make those kind of clarification. Ask questions. Actually, it's completely okay to ask questions like, oh, so is this what you're feeling right now? And they can help clarify that, no, actually, this is what I'm actually feeling. So, asking questions is completely fine. So as long as you do it without, showing any kind of judgment. Sometimes we can ask questions in a judgmental way. So that's why we need to be more mindful of our body language, of our facial expressions and stuff like that. Yeah. So as I said, there's layers to listening, right? So listening isn't just, yeah, I'm all ears, I'm listening, but are you actually listening? So
Yeah,
listen to
that
not,
happens a lot, right?
yeah, are you being
To
fully
most of us.
present? Exactly. Are we
Mm,
being fully present? Are we actually listening? Sometimes we listen to just counter what the other person is saying, to prove them that they are wrong for thinking
yeah,
that way. But for someone that needs help, they need listening ears. They want to be heard. They want to be understood. That's the goal. So we, as someone offering those listening ears, this is what we need to do to ensure that they feel heard and they feel understood. Yeah.
mm.
So that's
So
how.
the listening is often the key, right? The starting
Definitely.
point. But a lot of times, we are just focusing on how to counter them or how to back, say the other way round, so that we're not really opening up the space to listen. So that
Mm-mm.
space itself is what you're trying to say as well, lah, right? To give them the space to and really
Absolutely.
just receive the information well.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. And letting them know that it's completely okay for
Mm.
them to, express whatever that they're feeling. So providing that safe space, make them feel safe in the first place to talk about their issues. So that's where we really, be present and be refrain ourselves from the judgments, is where they feel safe. Usually they don't feel safe because, they're afraid of judgments. So if you're actually making it a safe space by saying that, you know what, it's okay, you can talk about it, we can talk about it, there's no judgments here. That's where they would open up more as well. So here's where we can help. And that takes us being more mindful of our own body language and our facial expressions. And yes, fair enough, certain things we don't necessarily agree with what the other person is saying. It can even anger us, especially a loved one. Certain things that they say can be alarming. And, they can say things like, I feel like I don't have anyone. And then you as a friend, you'll be like, hello, am I not someone? So that's not the place for us to say, like, how can you say that? Like, I'm here, right? That goes into an argument. So that right there is how we tend to invalidate people's emotions sometimes. But the fact
Yeah.
remains is that that's what they feel, right? They feel alone in that moment. So our job is there to be present and tell them that, you know
Yeah,
what,
I like
well,
to add up to that encounters, right? Sometimes when I talk to my boyfriend, for
mm,
example, then it's like,
mm-hmm,
oh, I don't want to talk about it yet. So
mm,
they sometimes people they're in that mood and in that zone, but they're not ready to talk about it. And it's okay as well just to allow that to be there, because if we try to force them to express, then it's not the real listening anymore. They're being forced to express. I guess
yes.
that one of it when we try to listen, we also accept what they are trying to, what they want as well.
Definitely. Definitely. That's a
Mm.
great point, actually. Yeah, that's no point in when, when the readiness is there. So know that sometimes people are not ready to talk about for whatever reason that may be. So the best we can do is to offer that space regardless. And if they are not ready yet, that's fine as well. So just, spending time with them in that moment, that itself can be helpful. Or just expressing that, you care, and whenever they are ready, you would be present with them. Just expressing that itself is enough, right? Sometimes. So
Mm.
yeah, just I'm trying to understand in that moment what they need. If in that moment they don't need to be heard, they just want someone to spend time with, then that's where you offer your help in that way. So again, it goes back to offering help in the ways that they need, not in the ways that we think they need. So that's the difference right there. Yeah.
Mm.
Yep.
Right, very well put. So the next point is staying calm, right? So would you want to
Yes.
elaborate a bit more? Mm.
Yeah, yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, certain things that they say can be alarming to us. It can worry us, but it's really crucial that in that moment that, we try our best to remain calm and, to, yes, it can be concerning for us, but like to, in that moment, to show that, like, how much you worry about them, then it becomes like you're making it about yourself, like how it's so worried you are about them. So that's where their emotions get dismissed. So we are gonna try to not do that. Although we are calm, we are really concerned on the inside. It's best in that moment is to let them know that, what, their life does matter to you. So you can make it a point to express that, to make them feel like they matter, and then they are actually important. So you can use that moment to express that instead of like saying how you feel. So in that moment, it's about them. It's not about us. Just be more mindful of that. Yeah.
Mm.
So yeah, staying. This is why staying calm is really important. Yeah.
I
So.
think this holding this space and being calm itself is already quite challenging to a lot of us because, like you said, in any kind of relationships, either it's a friendship or family relationship
Mhm.
with your partner as well, we have our own perception and also our own needs. So when
Mhm.
they are expressing certain things that are against what we think or what we believe, sometimes we get
Yeah.
triggered or we get a different feeling about it. We want to argue, we want to say, want to invalidate them in other ways. So I guess that part is quite challenging to remain calm and tell ourselves like, okay, hold on to that before we jump into conclusion, before we make any more assumptions, we just hold on our thoughts and open up the space for them to talk about it.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Essentially, it's about like telling ourselves like, okay, in this moment, this is what this person needs. And if you don't fully understand what the other person needs, is that's where you try to understand, you try to ask questions and try to understand more. So just be reminded of the goal of that conversation in that moment is that this person needs something right now, and let's try our best to identify that and do the best within our capabilities, of course, to help this person. Yeah, and how we help is sometimes by offering help could look really different, right? And sometimes all they need is just listening ears, and that's where we offer our listening ears. And sometimes on a more on a more severe note, maybe they do need psychological help. They do need professional help, and that's where we can offer help. Like, okay, I can actually try looking up a few places if that's all right with you. Offer those kind of help, and you can do your best in trying to share information. Maybe we can, information is always there. All we need to do is go online and look for this information. So you can offer help in that ways, like what ways you can try to channel those resources to them, show them like, what resources are there. And in that way, also like giving them hope that, their situation isn't entirely hopeless. All they need to do is that all they need is a bit of assistance, and you're there to assist them. So that would definitely mean something to them. So in
Mm.
that ways, we are definitely doing more than enough. So yeah, just identify what they need in that moment. And also, yeah, finding resources. And sometimes as a loved one, we do want to be able to do more than just listening. Sometimes, a part of ourselves, we have that urge to like give out advices. Like I said, it's one of the don'ts. Try your best to not do that, but instead just offer this kind of help. And offer in moments where they, if let's say, sometimes attending therapy sessions can be very intimidating, especially if it's their first time. So you can offer to be with them, be present with them in that situation also, like attending appointments together or just following them, stuff like that. That can be helpful. Or sometimes like just reaching out to make inquiries on the appointments, that itself is also a bit difficult for them. So that's where you can offer the help to do that for them. These are the ways we can actually help. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree with
And
that. A company
mhm,
part is really a big support itself because
for sure.
they may really want to get help as well, but they haven't mastered or they feel quite fearful about these therapy sessions, quite scary lah. So
Mm-hmm.
having someone close to them, friends or families to support is I can see that when I some of our clients they come together with their family members. I think the client himself or herself also felt quite supported as well.
Yeah.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah, definitely. Support can look very different. It can, it doesn't have to be really grand things that you do for them, right? It can be as simple as like, inviting, like going out on a breakfast, like you can just invite them to go out on a breakfast. In that way, they can just, if for someone who struggles with getting up early, so maybe like, let's go out on a breakfast tomorrow. So that could be something that they could look forward to. And especially with a loved one, they feel like, oh, there is someone for me actually. So simple things like that. And there are also simple ways we can encourage positive lifestyle changes, going out on a walk together, those kind of things we can actually do to support someone. So yeah, support can be something really simple, and those little things can actually go a long way.
There's one more thing that I would like to add, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just now you mentioned about giving the resources and referring them to the right places. Sometimes I do notice like some clients they were kind of being forced and being pulled into the therapist room, and that's
Mm,
quite a different scenario compared to
true.
referring them and offering them the right support, because sometimes they may not be ready to talk to a therapist yet,
Yeah.
and so when we try to force them into the session, it won't be very productive as well lah. So sometimes in this case, right, it would be better if they can offer them this option first, help them to understand what's the purpose of therapy, try to explain to them bit by bit, not to force that information into them
Yeah,
lah. So it's like forcing someone to eat a bread. We can't do that, right? So
of course.
try to get them to understand about the bread first and see how tasty it is or things like that, so that
Yeah.
they will be more willing and to open up and to try out another option such as therapy and medication. Mm,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
yeah.
if necessary. Yeah,
Mm,
absolutely. That's important as well. Again, offering help in ways that they need, not in the ways that we feel like they need. Right? If we feel like they need therapy, and if we were to like force them into it, it's not going to be helpful as well. There's going to be more resistance, and
mm,
therapy works when there's lesser resistance, because at the end of the day, it's going to come back to how well whatever the caring, how well it's received by the other person. So obviously, if you're going to drag someone into it and when they're not ready, that resistance is going to be there, and that's where it's not going to be very helpful. So yeah, just try to understand when it's going to be helpful and in what ways it will be actually helpful for that particular person. So that's going to take understanding their needs first. So which is why it's so crucial that we are, listening and really understanding it properly and also validate them. Yeah. So
mm, mm.
and yeah, be mindful of the don'ts as mentioned earlier. So anything to add on more on the don'ts if you have anything?
Mm, yeah, I think one more thing about it is about the minimizing. I think we haven't been touching too much on this
Mm,
minimizing their feelings or invalidating their feelings.
yeah,
So
yeah,
sometimes we may, if let's say your friends or your loved ones they express about how they're feeling lonely, they've been feeling down, feeling anxious, all of their feelings. If they have shared a snippet of it, but the way we respond, if it's about oh you're thinking too much about it, or just snap out of it, just go and do something else, you feel better afterwards. So some of these may come from a good intention to want to make them feel better, but it actually is not really helpful because it feels like, oh, so my feelings is I'm thinking too much about it, or oh my feelings don't really matter, I should just get rid of my feelings. So that will make them feel like, oh, my feelings don't really matter. They will try to minimize as well, and they won't really recognize these feelings is giving them some essential message for them to find a solution or for them to process these emotions better. Actually, all of these emotions, they do have a reason to exist and help us to find a better way to cope with the situation. So instead of avoiding it, they may need to go through that process of, I feel this and I want to process. I may want to take a few days or a few hours to just feel this emotion, and then after processing it, then they can find out a better way to cope with the situation. They will go and do other things as well. So that's yeah. So I guess that's really important for us to understand. So
Definitely.
because sometimes if for myself, I will feel like anxious last time lah. Like I will feel anxious like, oh, I should do something to make this person feel better. But actually when we try too quickly want to help this person, it actually backfires. So
Yeah, it's counterproductive.
Mm,
Definitely. Yeah.
mm,
So it takes like taking a few step backs because yeah, let's face it, as mentioned earlier, with most mental health struggles, they can stem from thoughts, right? And those thoughts can be irrational. That's what makes us feel a certain way. But it doesn't give us right to invalidate those emotions right away. Like again, emotions are emotions. They're welcome, right? We are made of emotions as human beings, we are bound to feel them, but it's just that the way in which we perceive certain situations or life circumstances, it can be in a way that is not helping us in a more positive direction. It makes us feel stuck in the same cycle. So to break that cycle is necessary. That's understandable, but just try to tell ourselves that it's not our job to right away do that, to like break that cycle right away. Is to firstly be present with that emotion, first acknowledge that first. You can't just like not address that big thing, right? Their emotions are huge. No, you can't just ignore it, right? You can't push it aside. We need to address that. So helping them to address it, welcoming it, and sometimes, let's face it, even the person feeling those emotions also would feel silly for feeling that in the first place. And it doesn't help for an additional person to say that you're silly for thinking that, right? So it's normalizing it, right? Like say, okay, it makes sense, even if it doesn't make sense to us. But just saying that, like, you know what, I can see why you feel that way. And if genuinely you don't see that, that's why asking those questions and making that effort to understand, that really does matter a lot to someone, to see that, someone is taking the effort to understand them. That itself can go a long way, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, one way that I really like about how they make us to feel like empathize with our clients as well is to really understand so many factors behind their current struggles. So it's
Yeah.
not just they themselves who is contributing to the issues, but it's more like a whole environmental combining with their personality, combining with the biological factors, physical issues as well. So maybe it's family members, there's stress at that point, there's a friendship issues, it's a lot of factors coming together. So trying to understand that so many layers of factors that we may not even be able to understand fully is like helping me to understand. I guess it helps people to understand as well that instead of seeing them as currently, or you have this issue only, but there's so many layers of issue factors contributing to this issue, and to understand that it's not our place to just in one go and resolve all this issue for them just like that. So
Yeah.
that will help us to feel more empathy lah with them as well.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. So yeah, it all goes back to really understanding that, okay, this is what they need in this moment, and it's not about what we think they need. So really clarifying that will be definitely important. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So
I think that's all. That's all right. Is there
yeah, in
anything else?
terms of the do's and don'ts, I think we've pretty much covered it. Like, yeah, just be mindful. So to re-emphasize, the do's are to listen, to understand, to remain calm. That's important as well. And to validate them and offer help in ways that they need. So for that, you need to first understand what they need and offer help in that way, in that direction. So like I said earlier, offering support, offering help can look really different. It's not necessarily like if we define or help looks like this and do it in that way, that is like our definition of help, and that may not be seen by the other person, right? Because their definition of help will depend on their needs. So giving help in accordance to their definition of help, that's what's going to be received by them. So just try to, it's kind of like speaking to someone in a completely different language if that's what they don't need in that moment. So I hope that analogy kind of like helps to put things into perspective. So yeah, just making that effort to understand first. It's gonna be, and it's not easy as well. Like we did acknowledge the part that it's not gonna be easy when we have our own emotions as well. We do care a lot about the other person, and to remain calm even in those situations, it's extremely difficult. But yes, it's not impossible as well. It's
Yeah.
just about like reminding ourselves multiple times that okay, in this moment I need to stay calm and just be present with this person right now and just give them their full attention and really understand what exactly is going on. So just be reminded of those things. It is indeed difficult. We are not saying that it's not difficult at all. It's not, to actually, because yeah, frankly speaking, it's a loved one. We have like this kind of complex in us, like, oh, we need to save this person. It's a loved one. I need to save them. So that kind of, complex comes in, and it's really hard to not give out advices or not to tell them like, do this, this will be helpful. But that's the thing. What we think is helpful may have worked for us, but will it actually work for them? That's a different story, right? So yeah, just know that the things that we think are helpful may be counterproductive sometimes. So make it a goal to understand what they need first, and then look into what we can actually do to help them. So with all this in mind, I think by now you can tell that there are certain limitations on how much we can help someone and where our responsibility lies, right? Like I say, at the end of the day, it's going to come back to that person on what they are going to decide for their life. If let's say the best you can do in that situation is to suggest therapy. That's the best you can do from your side. But if they reject it because they're not ready at that moment, and you did your best, right? It's if they're not ready, it's not on you, right? So just learning that what's in your control and what's not in your control, that's going to be helpful for yourself as well. So here we are actually touching on more on like how we as a caregiver or as a friend who's wanting to help, or as a loved one who's wanting to offer help for someone, sometimes it comes with a lot of difficulties. Actually, it comes with a lot of difficulties to deal with the fact that you are there and trying your best to offer your help for someone, and if it's not received in that way, or if it's not working out in the way you want it to work out, there are limitations there as well. So, and know that it's not your fault. With these limitations, it's not our fault, or it's not, there's only so much we can do in certain situations. This doesn't mean that we are giving up on the other person. It just means that, we are always going to come back to focus on what's in our control and just focus on doing that. Yeah, just understand that it is indeed taxing. Being able to care for someone and provide someone with help, it is definitely difficult. So just understand the difficulties and understand that in those moments you need to care for your own mental health as well. You are just as important as anyone.
Yeah. I'd
So
like to add
yeah,
on a bit, right?
for
That I think
sure.
those people, any one of you who join this talk, right, can see that you really want, maybe you have met someone around you that you really want to help, and the intention to want to help itself is already very, very good, very something that I think anyone will be appreciative of,
For
because
sure.
that intention is not everyone will have that intention as well, to want to learn and want to try to do something you can do. Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, yeah, and sometimes, like I said, it is a taxing process to be able to provide someone and to be a caregiver for someone who is, struggling mentally. It is definitely emotionally draining, and that's where you need to be mindful of your energy levels as well, how you're gonna feel about doing something. Sometimes we can't help but to overdo certain things. That's where knowing where your responsibility lies is going to be important, because you need to be fair to yourself as well. If you are, going all out and being there for someone, and it's taking a toll on you, that's not helpful for you as well. So you need to be more mindful of how you are being affected. And yeah, your mental health matters just as much as anyone else as well. So just, be mindful of that, and ask yourself if you are caring for yourself enough in this process. have that constant check-ins with yourself. Ask yourself if you're, doing enough to care for yourself at the same time, and sometimes asking yourself if you're overdoing it. And sometimes doing something can feel forceful, or if you feel like, if I do this, will it make me feel resentful towards this person? And that's where you know that you're overdoing it. You're probably not listening to yourself. You are, crossing your own boundaries. That's not okay as well, right? So that becomes like, that defeats the purpose, because you're there for this person in the first place because you care for them. And now that you're gonna do certain things and that's gonna make you resent that person, what's the whole point of this, right? Because yeah, and sometimes it can feel selfish to hold certain boundaries and say that, actually this time I'm not available right now, and I'm gonna come back when I'm like fully ready. Sometimes it can make us feel guilty to say these kind of things, but that's it's necessary to actually preserve the friendship or relationship, to when you're actually being there for someone. So it can feel selfish, but it's not a selfish thing to do at all, to care for yourself first sometimes, because you matter just as much as others. So yeah, it's gonna take you having that check-ins with yourself and ask yourself how you're feeling on the inside from time to time. If it indeed draining, you need to listen to yourself and give yourself that care and support that you need also. And yeah, of course, if you need to reach out to your own support system, or like have your own ways to recharge, go ahead and do that as well. It's absolutely fine to do that. Yeah. And also again comes back to looking things, putting things into perspective and really see where your responsibility lies and what's really in your control, and focus on those things that are indeed in your control. And the other person's emotions is something that's not in your control. And sometimes we can't help but to feel responsible, but again, it's not in our control, right? So just objectively seeing things in that way, it's going to be helpful for yourself, for you to be fair to yourself as well. So that's extremely important. Yeah,
Mm.
sometimes small things as just being a listener is itself enough, like what you said earlier. And yeah, you were gonna add something?
Yeah, I mean, I thought you were gonna answer, but I really
Sorry.
like one of the points like you were pointing out is that feeling of resentment.
Mm,
If let's say you really do feel like if I do this, I will feel like resentful, I feel like unfairness that is gonna build up over time, that will actually jeopardize the relationship with another person eventually when we feel too much of this unfairness, because relationship it is best to be quite in a fair trade lah. We give as much
yeah.
as we can, but also we would like to take care of ourselves. So just want to emphasize that point is really important as well.
Mm,
Mm,
mm.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because yeah, like I said, it is a very tiring process and emotionally draining process to be there for someone. And if even if it's like, sorry, especially if it's like constantly being there for someone, it's something, it's very, very tiring. So you need to be mindful of how you're feeling on the inside as well. And here's the thing, helping someone doesn't, the goal of helping someone isn't to create dependence, right? Dependence isn't actually helpful. So by providing support for someone, and if it means that they're going to be dependent on you, that isn't a real help actually. Even with therapy, it happens like, it's not a constant thing that happens every single day, right? So we actually refrain from building that kind of dependence. So once you notice dependence, that's where you know that you're not actually helping in the right direction, you're overdoing it, and it's not helpful for the other person as well once they are starting to feel dependent on you. It's actually unhealthy. So the goal isn't to create this kind of dependence, to constantly be there with them. It's about helping them to get the necessary help they need to build the skills they need to navigate through life again. So goes back to knowing where your responsibility lies. I think sometimes
Maybe you
just
would like
reminding
to,
themselves of,
I think maybe you would like to kind of elaborate a bit more on the dependence, because I think that's related
mm-mm,
to the boundaries, right? How do you define
definitely.
whether you are developing this dependency or not? Kind of a bit more examples.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
for sure. It's like, if let's say whenever there are like moments of distress and they feel the need to, like, call you, and like they demand some time to talk to you. And that's something that is, that okay, that's dependence, right? And that shows that they are lacking this emotional regulation skills that they can do on their own first before they reach out for help, right? So that's why it's something that is not working out for them, and you are uh, you know needing you to be constantly there, that right there is dependence. So that actually prevents them from, because in the real world, realistically speaking, who can be there for someone all the time? Not even
Yeah,
therapists, right?
exactly.
So the goal is always to help them build that kind of emotional independence, and also like the skills necessary for them to regulate on their own. And of course, in moments where it gets extremely overwhelming, that's where they need assistance. But to jump into that assistance right away, that's where it's not really helpful. They need to first rely on their coping skills first. So that's where what the best we can do is remind them of the coping skills. Hey, remember, when you're feeling this way, what should we do, right? And when you're feeling anxious, what we can do is practice breathing. So reminding them of those coping skills. That's how we assist. But we can't be the person who's like, when they're having a emotional reaction, to be there for them, to listen all the time, and like to kind of like put that pressure on ourselves that, okay, whenever this person is in distress, I need to be there. That's where it becomes not just unfair to you, but also counterproductive to their healing process, because
So it's
that's
more
that
like
right
a
there, the dependence develops. Yeah.
they are the person, everyone is responsible for their own emotions and well-being. So when they do need help, yes, they can do that, but we are not responsible for their well-being all the time. Like it's like always like being the firefighter, always have to give them the water to flush away all the fires that's burning, right? So
Yeah.
that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
Exactly, definitely. That you
Mm.
put it really, that energy was definitely helpful. So yeah, to really know where our responsibility lies. And this is again and again, and something that I'm emphasizing, that yeah, you are not responsible for the other person's, completely responsible for the other person's emotions and well-being. It's something that all of us need to take responsibility for ourselves, right? So, we can only show them the direction, and, redirect them to the resources that they need. That's where we can only assist, we can only guide. But it's kind of like, you can't drag the horse to the pool and make them drink water, right? You can only bring them to the pool, but to really make them drink it, we can't do that.
Mm.
So it's gonna take really understanding where how much we can do in certain situations, and just come to terms with the fact that we won't be able to do that all the time, and that's okay. Just coming to terms with that, that's really important.
Yeah,
So
acknowledging
I
that
think,
limitations.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. So I think, to conclude this, a simple thing would be, when it comes to like being there for someone, and when someone reaches out to you, to help us navigate that conversation, how it's going to go, is to just ask them if in that moment they need listening ears, or if they need solutions, because sometimes they would be needing solutions, and that's why you can brainstorm solutions together and not be the only person giving out solutions, right? So that's what you can do. And if they just need listening ears, then that's all you need to do, just listen. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think that's one a simple tip I would say to take away from today's live session, is that yeah, when you've decided you're going to be there for someone, you can just start by asking if they need listening ears, or if they need solutions in this situation. Yeah.
And I'd like to emphasize as well, just now you mentioned about the circle of control. You guys can Google it up as well. So kind of reflecting at the circle of control from time to time again, because sometimes we will fall into
Yeah.
I want to control things that are out of my control, and then get so frustrated
Yeah.
with wanting to control it. And at the end of the day, when trying to see it, oh, this thing may not be 100% under my control, because that's other people's behaviors, their emotions, their thoughts, instead of my own thing. So
Mm-hmm.
trying to reflect on this circle of control help you to recognize, okay, I'm doing what I can do already, and that's really good itself. So I don't
Yeah.
really have to get all in control with other things that's outside of my control or outside of my influence lah. So helping yourself to realign back and recognize you already did well. That's
Yeah.
very important as well. Mm.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think
Mm.
that's a really good way to put it, for sure. Just, yeah, there are certain things we can control, certain things we can only influence, and there are certain things you just can't control at all. So just know those things and be reminded of it constantly. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm. All
Yeah.
right. I think about
I
time as well.
suppose, for sure. Yeah, yeah. And I think we've come to the end of it. Like, we've pretty much summarized the main gist of today's topic. So I hope there are things to take away for all of you today. And thank you so much for being here and listening. Giving your time to listen to our session. And not to worry if you have missed out on this. This whole live session will be up on our YouTube channel, so you can rewatch them. They're gonna be available soon. So I hope this is helpful. And of course, as always, we welcome feedbacks and any questions. They're always welcome, and it doesn't have to be within this live session as well. You can always drop questions through
PM us
our,
as well.
Instagram. Yes, you can DM us as well. Yeah. So if there's nothing else, we can call it a day. Yes. Yep. I guess we are good to go. So again.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Just now you were a bit lagging, but
I
hope
see.
they
Right.
hear it.
Yeah. Okay then. So thank you so much once again. And on that note, we'll end our live session. We would like to show our appreciation to you for supporting us. And it's not just that, also to making the time to really learn about mental health and like creating these events and also learning more on this. I think you guys are contributing to the society by doing this actually, because once you develop this understanding of mental health, we do, without realizing, make an impact by making these changes within ourselves, and that does create an impact with people around us. So you guys are, I would like to show my appreciation for you guys for doing this actually. So thank you, and yeah, looking forward to see you guys again.